So double clicking on resume, this is a question that I think everyone asks is in a sea of resumes looking the same, how the hell do I stand out?
That's a great question. One of the best things you can do to stand out, and so few designers do this, is quantify the impact and results in your resume. A lot of people, they make claims on their resume. They focus on responsibilities like, I designed mockups, I did research. And that's great. That shows you have UX experience, but so does every other candidate applying for the role. It doesn't really make you stand out. And so, something you can do is quantify the scope and impact of what you did. For example, I remember seeing a portfolio for a user researcher. Most user researchers, they have the generic, I love interviewing people and developing empathy. And it's like, great, so do the other 500 user researchers applying for this role. This particular user researcher, at the very top of their portfolio website, they had counted how many user research sessions they had led, in addition to their years of experience. And let me tell you, especially if you're hiring for like a junior level role, just seeing a designer being like, yeah, I've done 107 user interviews and I've led 22 user research studies, that just immediately, whoa, I really do trust you. Obviously, I have to dig into the case study and interview process to make sure you're doing those effectively, because that is just a scope or quantity metric. That just immediately gave me the confidence of like, okay, if you've done this 107 times, then yeah, you can come here and do it. If you're making any mistakes, we can help coach and mentor you. But that is just such a simple way, like just counting how many user interviews you've done. That's a metric you can share. And I think a lot of the earlier career designers, they struggle because they say, well, I don't have any projects that were published. I don't have any analytics or metrics, which, it's great if you do have something that's published. If you don't have that though, there are other ways to get around that, especially with user research. Like let's say you're a designer, you design a solution, you go test it with 5 users. During that testing with those 5 users, you can get metrics. You can ask them questions. Let's say you do an A/B test. You test the existing product, you test your new solution. You can ask them how many of them prefer the new solution versus the existing solution. Let's say 80% of them prefer the new solution. Like that right there is a metric that you can quantify that. You can always do napkin math to figure out how much money would that save the company? How did we decrease task time? You can get those metrics from user testing. Obviously, there are hypothetical metrics. You're basically saying, based on this population, here's what we predict. There's ways to quantify the scope of what you've done, the value that could bring to a company, and that will really set you apart in your portfolio. Once again, only about 5 to 10% of designers out there I see do that.
I really like I've done 107 interviews. They could go further and be like, these are how many minutes I've done to make it eat like 10,000 minutes. Like, holy crap,
Yeah.
they must be an expert. And I think that's something that's super underrated, where the first line of usually any website is like, hi, I'm Chris. That doesn't do anything. You already know who I am. Otherwise, you wouldn't be clicking on my website. So pitching that like, this is my experience or the differentiator of me. This is like, when you go to any product website, it's usually very clear on what that product does or what value it brings or the benefits. Designers building their portfolios should be thinking around like, okay, I'm a product. What sort of features that I have that I can highlight just in that hero, in that H1, I think just makes so much more impact. And if you can wrap it in something like some sort of measurement that sounds interesting, people will be like, oh, I'm automatically probably going to dedicate 5 more minutes on this portfolio, for example, right?
Yeah. And I love how you referred that. It's like what companies do with their landing page. Something I'm constantly trying to remind designers is your portfolio isn't just a project repository. Your portfolio is a marketing and sales page. You really have to put on that sales hat, that marketing hat of how are you going to sell your value proposition? What makes you different than the hundreds of other designers out there? It's the same way if a startup, let's say you want to create a messaging app today. Well, guess what? There are thousands upon thousands of messaging apps in the App Store. And so if you're going to come in this extremely crowded space and try to convince everyone why they should use your messaging app, you need a very clear, distinct value proposition. You really need to differentiate what sets you apart. And that can be through metrics, that can be through storytelling. Almost every single hero section I see says the exact same thing. It's, I am passionate about making users' lives better and coming up with innovative solutions. Great. So does every single designer out there. You really need to focus on that sales and marketing message. What's your unique value proposition? And even if it's the same, that user researcher, yes, they were a user researcher, just like the other 1,000 user researchers, but they can at least quantify the scope of their experience and make it specific. Instead of just saying, I'm an amazing user researcher, they said, I've done this many sessions, and that immediately set them apart from every other junior user researcher. Could instantly just see, okay, they're like, this is an objective statement. They're not just claiming they're better. They're just showing what they are, what they've done in a very specific, quantified way.
Exactly, because what ends up happening, as you mentioned, is like they say the same thing as everybody else. So you end up not standing out in a sea. But also, a lot of the things they say are one cliche. Managers read it, they're like, oh, not again, right? So automatically it's like a red flag. The second thing, it's almost a prerequisite to the job. If you didn't like these things, you wouldn't be doing it. So you're just repeating things that you should be doing, or like you should have a passion for this field. Otherwise, why are you here? So guys, focus on your H1. And remember, the first take is usually the worst. So multiple iterations of the header and your value proposition is needed. So you mentioned owning your own career growth. If I am climbing up the ranks, I've built my portfolio and I've networked and I've got to a mid-level designer and then eventually senior, what's next after a senior designer position?
I typically see 3 common paths. Once someone's
Want to listen to the full conversation? Click the video on screen now. Subscribe to the channel if you want to join us live. Oh, wait. Okay, fine, you don't have to join us for the live stream, but if you like stuff like this, then click that subscribe button. I'll see you on the inside. Bye!